The 1920s were a nightmare for Germany. Berlin's gray streets echoed with the howl of the wind as people pushed wheelbarrows full of paper money to buy a loaf of bread. The mark was so worthless that a cup of coffee cost trillions. Savings, dreams, and hopes for the future vanished in a puff of smoke. Yet from this darkness, one man emerged, Hjalmar Schacht. With his financial genius, he pulled Germany from the brink, only to later pull the strings of Hitler's rise. But when his conscience caught up with him, everything changed. He'd pay the price for defying the regime in a concentration camp, a story of a financial wizard's moral awakening, meteoric rise, and tragic downfall. Buckle up, because this is one epic ride. Hjalmar Schacht came into the world on a chilly January day in 1877 in the small town of Tinglev, near the Danish border. His father, William, was a merchant who'd once tried his luck in America. His mother, Constanza, a Danish baroness. Even as a kid, Hjalmar's sharp mind turned heads. In school, he dabbled in one subject after another, but numbers and economics were where his heart beat loudest. By 1899, he graduated with honors in economics, stepping into a world brimming with possibility. He landed a job at Dresdner Bank, hunched over stacks of paper in a dim office lit by the flicker of a gas lamp. Every number, every balance sheet was a puzzle begging to be solved, and he dove in headfirst. His razor-sharp intellect and knack for analysis shot him up the ranks. By 1908, at just 31, he was the bank's assistant director. When World War I erupted, he served as a financial advisor in the German occupation government in Belgium, learning how to keep a nation's finances afloat amid chaos. Those lessons laid the foundation for the financial wizardry that would define his legacy. The summer of 1923 was a disaster for Berlin. People burned banknotes to heat their homes as savings and dreams melted away in a hyperinflation inferno. Enter Schacht, appointed as the Reich's currency commissioner. He set up shop in a cramped office, a repurposed janitor's closet in the Reichsbank's stone building. Papers piled high on his desk, the air thick with cigarette smoke. Schacht worked through the night, his eyes bloodshot, but his mind razor-focused, crafting a plan to stop the madness. He took a bold swing, the Rentenmark. This new currency wasn't tied to gold or foreign cash, but to Germany's land and industrial assets. Its farms and factories gave it value. Schacht halted the endless printing of the old mark, which had fueled the inflation fire. He pegged the mark to the US dollar, setting 4.2 trillion old marks to $1. The Rentenmark's circulation was tightly controlled, with only a limited amount printed to hold its value. He slapped on new taxes and slashed government spending to close the budget gap. Slowly, trust returned. Markets buzzed back to life, shops reopened, and the Rentenmark worked like a miracle, stopping inflation dead in its tracks. Overnight, Schacht became a hero. That December, he was named Reichsbank president. The financial wizard nickname stuck, a nod to the magic he'd woven in the world of finance. By the late 1920s, Schacht's star kept rising. He reshaped Germany's war reparations with the Dawes and Young plans. The Dawes Plan brought in American loans to jumpstart the economy. The Young Plan cut reparations and stretched out payments. These moves drew international investment, and Germany began to heal. But Schacht clashed with the Weimar government. He opposed the Young Plan, fearing it would chain Germany to long-term dependency, and resigned as Reichsbank president. In his mind, the seeds of change were already sprouting. Schacht's soul was caught in a storm. The Weimar Republic's weakness, economic chaos, and public anger weighed heavily on him. In Berlin's streets, he saw the fury in the eyes of jobless youth. The rise of communist and socialist movements unnerved him, a man from the bourgeois class. Democracy, he believed, couldn't tame this chaos. Only a strong leader could pull the nation together. By the late 1920s, the Nazi Party caught his eye. He read Mein Kampf, and Hitler's fiery nationalism and vision of economic self-reliance struck a chord with Schacht's frustration over Weimar's failures. Hitler's ideas felt like an answer to his quest for order. Schacht began to lean toward fascism, the first step in his political transformation. One cool Berlin evening in 1930, Schacht found himself at Hermann Göring's mansion, crystal chandeliers casting light across the table. At the other end sat a man brimming with passion, Adolf Hitler. Schacht was captivated by Hitler's charisma and vision of restoring Germany's greatness. It aligned with his hunger for economic stability. He saw potential in this movement and believed his financial genius could turn Hitler's dreams into reality. (1932) was a rough year for the Nazi Party. They were losing votes and their coffers were running dry. But Schacht saw an opportunity in the struggle. With Wilhelm Kepler, he rallied a group of industrialists and landowners, drafting a petition called the Industrielle Eingabe. It urged President Hindenburg to name Hitler as chancellor. Schacht organized meetings to win over Germany's business elite. In a plush Berlin hotel, he stood in a grand hall filled with cigar smoke and men in tuxedos. He knew they were fed up with the Weimar's economic mess and terrified of rising communism. With a calm, steady voice, Schacht promised that Hitler would bring order, protect their businesses, and crush the communist threat. He dangled the prospect of fat government contracts if the Nazis took power. It worked. The German Industrialists Association pledged 3 million Reichsmarks to the Nazi Party, a cash infusion that fueled Hitler's 1933 election victory. Schacht had turned his financial savvy into a political weapon, setting off a chain reaction that would reshape a nation's fate. When Hitler seized power, he didn't forget Schacht's role. On March 17, 1933, he reappointed him Reichsbank president. Schacht was ready to push boundaries. Hitler's goal was clear: to rearm Germany and make it an economic powerhouse. But the Versailles Treaty capped Germany's borrowing, limiting the Reichsbank to lending just 100 million Reichsmarks to the government. Schacht outsmarted the restrictions with a brilliant scheme. He created a shell company, Metallurgische Forschungsgesellschaft, with a mere 1 million Reichsmarks in capital. Arms companies could sell MFO bills, essentially IOUs for weapons and equipment, to banks for cash. These MFO bills were a covert credit system, funding rearmament off the official books to dodge Versailles sanctions. The bills kept factories humming, slashed unemployment, and fueled Hitler's economic miracle. Schacht was the architect behind it all. By the summer of 1934, Schacht was handed the economy ministry, giving him near total control over Germany's finances. He tightly regulated imports and exports, aiming to make Germany self-sufficient, especially for the raw materials needed for rearmament. He seized foreign capital, issued short-term bonds, and funded government debt. Public projects like Autobahn construction put millions back to work, boosting Hitler's popularity. Schacht's financial wizard title was cemented. But cracks were forming. The Nazi regime's anti-Semitic policies began to gnaw at his moral compass. In 1935, at a Königsberg fair, he took a bold stand, publicly criticizing Nazi newspaper editor Julius Streicher and the regime's lawless attacks on Jews. The crowded fairground fell silent as he spoke, his voice trembling but resolute under the setting sun. His words sent ripples through the regime. While still serving Hitler, Schacht was growing uneasy with its radical turn. Yet in 1937, he accepted an honorary Nazi Party membership and a Golden Party badge, tying him closer to the regime he was starting to question. Schacht's soul was a battleground. By 1935-36, he was fighting an economic crisis while leading the free market faction in the government alongside Karl Friedrich Goerdeler. He urged Hitler to cut military spending, abandon self-sufficiency policies, and loosen the state's grip on the economy. But Hitler and Hermann Göring weren't having it. Göring's appointment to lead the four-year plan in 1936 sidelined Schacht's influence. He clashed openly with Göring, calling the unchecked rearmament spending a recipe for economic ruin. Schacht's faith in the regime began to crumble. The Nazis' anti-Jewish policies ate at his conscience. Walking Berlin's streets, he saw shattered Jewish shop windows and families humiliated. One night, as he headed home, he witnessed a Jewish family being dragged from their house, a child's cries echoing in his ears. The scene haunted him. Sleepless nights followed, spent in his study under the glow of a gas lamp, wrestling with his thoughts. His financial genius had saved a nation, but now it was fueling a descent into darkness. His support for Hitler had carved a wound in his soul. The regime's violence, greed, and moral decay pushed him further away each day. By the fall of 1937, Schacht reached a breaking point. In a heated meeting with Hitler, he stood his ground, warning that runaway rearmament would tank the economy. His voice shook, but his resolve held firm. Hitler was livid, seeing Schacht's defiance as betrayal. Schacht didn't back down. On September 5th, he took leave from the economy ministry, resigning formally on November 16th from both that role and his position as general plenipotentiary for the war economy. Hitler, reluctant to lose him entirely, kept him on as a minister without portfolio, with the same salary. Schacht stayed on as Reichsbank president, but unease plagued him. Through 1938, the bank kept funding rearmament with long-term loans, but Schacht felt a growing crisis. By 1939, he saw the Reichsbank could no longer sustain the spending. Inflation loomed. He penned a letter to Hitler, pleading for an end to the madness. Hitler, enraged by the note, fired Schacht as Reichsbank president on January 20th, 1939. Schacht lingered as a minister without portfolio until 1943, but his influence was gone. After breaking with the regime, Schacht reached out to the resistance. He met secretly with leaders like Hans Dohnanyi and Erwin von Witzleben. Early in 1944, in a dimly lit Berlin apartment on a shadowy street, Schacht attended a clandestine meeting. A single lamp cast a faint glow as whispers filled the room. There, he first heard of a plot to assassinate Hitler. His heart raced, torn between fear and hope. The resistance valued Schacht's financial expertise and global connections, believing he could help fund their plans. While not directly involved, he offered information and logistical support. But on July 20th, 1944, the assassination attempt failed. The Gestapo arrested Schacht, suspecting his ties to the plot. He was thrown into a Berlin Gestapo prison for 4 months, then sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp. The once mighty financial wizard was now a prisoner in cold, damp cells. Later, he was moved to Flossenburg and then Dachau, enduring brutal conditions that tested his physical and mental limits. In April 1945, as the war neared its end, the SS transferred him and 141 other special prisoners to the Alpine fortress in South Tyrol. On April 30th, in Niederdorf, the U.S. Fifth Army set him free. The war's smoke had cleared, but Schacht's past clung to him like a shadow. In 1945, the Allies arrested him, and he faced trial at Nuremberg. In the cold, stone-walled courtroom, he sat at the defendant's bench, confronting the weight of his actions. Accused of supporting the Nazis, he defended himself by recounting his work with the resistance and his time as a prisoner in concentration camps. He was acquitted, but it was no triumph. Deep down, the wounds of his early support for Hitler still bled. After the trial, Schacht retreated to a quiet life. In a modest Berlin home, he lived with the echoes of his past. At night, sitting at his old piano, he closed his eyes as his fingers touched the keys, feeling the sting of guilt and the chill of the camps in every note. One question haunted him. Was it worth it? His financial brilliance had saved a nation but darkened millions of lives. When he died in Munich in 1970 at 93, he left behind a legacy shrouded in tragedy. Hjalmar Schacht, once hailed as a financial wizard, faded into history as one of its most controversial figures, his conscience buried with him in the earth. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and share to keep exploring.